thank you everyone for coming and taking the time out of your busy Sunday with your families to come to this talk on behavior and brain development. The reason I got into this work is because kids are just struggling in this day and age. There's more IEPs than ever. Alternative schools are blowing up because regular school is not supporting kids in the way that they need support. And so my goal for you tonight is to go away with at least one gem, one nugget of information that helps you advocate for or connect with or engage with your child or your spouse or your coworkers or yourself to create more understanding about why people are the way they are. So if you can do that, that is a win. And this is Vendovia and his little friend Olive, and I just put that there because I think they're so cute. So what are we talking about in this hour? In order to understand what we call deflected brain development and processing challenges, we first have to understand normal brain development. So I'm going to boil down the complexity of brain development because it's a really complex subject, but I have a great way to get my information in my brain over to your brains. So we're specifically talking about behavioral learning and socialization and developmental challenges in our kids, but we also work with adults, and we can do this work for the adult population as well. So the big idea is, how do we shift from the deficit model of like, hey, what's wrong with my kids, to the expression of life model, which is, hey, how do we make this kid's life great from the inside out? So this is our license plate in Alaska. Can anyone take a guess as to what it means? Please bear with me. Yeah, please bear with me. So this whole, like all of this work that I'm going to talk about today is actually, it's from one of my classmates in chiropractic school. She came up with this idea and this program and this different way to look at things. And so I am trying to do justice to her amazing work, and that is why I'm going to be like reading my notes sometimes. And I've been doing this talk for like a year, and I have like different colored pages and scribbles everywhere. So if I get kind of like stuck, please bear with me. So who here is confused about why a chiropractor would be talking about brain development? Anybody? Yeah. So what do you guys think of when you think of chiropractic?
Cracking the spinal adjustments?
Right, like twisting, cracking, popping. Is it gentle?
No.
Right, so that's traditional chiropractic. That's not what we do on the pediatric population. We don't like rip kids' necks and do all that big twisting. We're very gentle, very specific, less is more in this population. The goal of traditional chiropractic is to temporarily relieve muscle spasm, swelling, pain, and that's all really good stuff. Like, that's very helpful, and I do that kind of work on my adult patients who are in pain. The point, the original founding of chiropractic was actually based on the neurology, the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves, and the connection between the body and the organs and tissues and cells. And I have this whiteboard up anyway, so this is kind of how I explain it to little kids. We've got information traveling up our spinal cord, which is like our information superhighway. It's going to the brain. The brain is processing, so we're taking in through our senses everything out in our world, and that's sight, sound, touch, everything coming in, love. It's entering our system, traveling up our spinal cord, entering our brainstem, going up into our midbrain and our prefrontal cortex, processing, and then the brain sends motor output, so signals out to the body to tell the body what to do. And it's a constant flow of information, of afferent messages going to the brain and efferent messages going out to the body. And we need a clear pathway for those messages to get through. So what can happen in these bones of the upper neck is they can get stuck. We call this a neurostructural shift. So if they get stuck and they are stuck enough that it stays stuck, then it can change the way we perceive what's going on in our world, because there's so much information flowing into our senses in this day and age, it can change it, and it can actually skew, kind of like static on a phone line. It can skew the information that is entering into the brain, and it can change the way the brain perceives what's going on out here in the world. It can also change the information that it sends back out to the body. And if that's happening, then that's a really, really big problem. So the big idea is that even in our adult patients, we can't always feel this going on in our body. Like, we can't feel this neurostructural shift, traditionally known as subluxation. We're looking for subluxations, misaligned bones that are creating blockages to information getting to our brain in an appropriate way. So if that's there, we can test for it. So we have like different types of testing that we can do. We have neurological scanning, where we can see what's going on in their system from an autonomic nervous system point of view. We have, we look at posture. I mean, this little kid, you can see, like, if he's walking around in his world like this, like, that is a big sign that his neck is off, and now it's affecting the signals to his brain, and it's affecting the way his brain is processing his world. So those are just a few things we do. We do reflex checks, and all sorts of different types of exams to know if these neurostructural shifts are present. And so really, can I just ask you guys a favor, for the purposes of this talk, if you can take your ideas of traditional chiropractic and just like leave them outside the door. You can always go back and pick them up on your way out. But for the purposes of this talk, we're going to be talking about neuro-based chiropractic. So any questions about that? Okay. All right. So you guys know me. I'm a neuro-based pediatric chiropractor. I have a bachelor's in speech and hearing sciences, so it's like a great foundation for, you know, ending up in this brain work, because I never thought I would be entering this career path that was just going to be a traditional pain chiropractor. But what happened was, in 2020, that's Sven Dovey, my son, our son, me and Carla's son, and when we moved into this house during COVID, we started to notice like really peculiar behavior, and I was very worried, because I was like, these behaviors, I don't know much about autism, but these behaviors I know are like precursors to autism. So I need to like figure out what's going on. He was just really into lining up his toys. He started to get a little bit OCD about how he went down the stairs, and if he missed like touching something, he had to run back up to the top and do it all again. And he started scripting movies. So, you know, he'd say something and you'd be like, oh, what did you say? And he was like, he wasn't even there. He's just like thinking, he's living in his movie in his head. And I was really, really worried about that. So I got in touch with my friend, Dr. Amy Spolstra. So she is the founder of this whole program. And she helped to talk me through it. And I really felt so much like, if I hadn't have had her input, then I would have had like nowhere else to turn. It wasn't like the pediatrician was like, oh, it's fine, he'll grow out of it. We took him to OT, but I never really knew like what they were doing at OT, so I didn't have any understanding of what was going on. So Dr. Amy's story is like kind of important to the work, because she grew up in the Midwest. She had like kind of a typical American family. Her dad was an optometrist, her mom was a school teacher, and she had a brother about 16 months older than her, and he used to beat up on her and punch holes in the wall, and he was like completely nuts. Just, you know, they could not control him. But for some reason, they decided not to medicate him, which, not saying anything is wrong with medicating, but they were like, okay, we're not going to medicate, we're going to just like, let's just try taking him to therapy. So they go to, and his diagnoses back in the 80s was dyslexia and ADD, and it probably would have also been oppositional defiance disorder if they had known that it was there, but they didn't know about that back then, or they didn't have that back then. So the optometrist father was watching him with like a dyslexia tutoring session, and he saw that his son, when they put different transparencies of colored plastic over the words, he saw his son was able to process the words and read and understand what he was reading. And he was like, what is going on here? I'm the light guy. Like, I should know, like, what is going on in his brain? And that was like the pivotal moment for their family, because he went from being just a plain old optometrist to becoming a neuro or behavior optometrist, which is another level of optometry. And Dr. Amy ended up spending her entire childhood watching her dad in lecture halls and learning his brain lecture, and she was lecturing that in 9th grade because like that was a subject that she knew. And so when she went to chiropractic school and she was sitting there in the first year and like learning about the nervous system and how the brain receives information, she was like, oh my gosh, like this profession needs to be talking to this profession. And not just that, all of these different professions, like they need to be talking to each other, because a lot of times when a kid has a challenge, first you're like, well, let me start with a naturopath, and then I'll go for OT. And it's like one step at a time, and it doesn't like gain traction. And then people get disappointed, and it's just like a slippery slope. And sometimes then it's hopeless for people. So, yeah, so her big idea is that, you don't just look at the deficits. People are more than a sum of their parts. And so she created this collaborative scientific approach in the Brain Blossom program. And so just to go over it a little bit, like it's a 4-pillared approach, multidisciplinary, encompassing functional neurology, neuro-based chiropractic, gut health, nutrition, developmental psychology, epigenetic and genetic work, and methylation, and looking at metabolic issues. So ultimately, pillar 1 is neuro-based chiropractic care, because we have to clean up the system. We have to clean up that nervous system and signals to the brain before we can go and do anything else, any other therapy. Pillar number 2 is nutrition and gut healing, because the gut is the second brain, and if you have inflammation in the gut, we're going to have kind of like a foggy brain. So we need to lift that brain fog and clear that up. And once we have like those 2 big things taken care of, then we can go into either outside therapy, like now that the brain is ready for growth, outside therapy, or neuro-deflected retraining. So that's basically a lot of brain games and exercises that we offer in an at-home app, 5 minutes a day, 3 to 5 days a week, which is designed to help the child rehab their brain based on the hierarchy of brain development, which we are going to talk about. So step number 4 is brain-based mentoring and parenting, helping parents understand and providing support and right now strategies, because sometimes you're like, well, I need something. Like with Vendovi, Dr. Amy was like, you need to draw out his day in little stick figures to give him prediction, because he's got the anxiety because he doesn't know what's coming next in his life. So little things like that, we're trying to help parents understand. And in this talk, you're going to get a lot of the basis of that. So let's have to push the button a couple times on this slide. So today we're going to talk about like a lot of different diagnoses. And so I just want to ask you guys not to like dismiss it because it doesn't apply to your kid. Because all of these diagnoses, autism, ADHD, OCD, PANS, PANDAS, like things like all of this across the board are similar pegs on a common spectrum. And we approach things as, hey, this is a brain, it's a brain that's not moving through development appropriately in a way that is best for the child. And we're going to talk about like how that all goes. So first of all, let's just talk about like what do we know, and not just in chiropractic research or pediatric research or neurological research or developmental psychology. Let's look outside all of that and just say like, what does the body of evidence, or what does science tell us? So we call this the triangle of simplicity. So the big thing that we know, a baby is not born with a fully developed brain. The brain has to move through a trajectory of development, bottom up, back to front, inside out, and right to left. And if we were to kind of like look at that, like I made the brain sideways, so here's the nose, here's the eyes, here's the first two bones of the spine. Development, when a baby's born, everything, like all their brain activity is here in the brainstem. So when I say bottom up, back to front, right to left, it's not linear. It's like kind of like a water slide. It's like this curly cute thing. And where we want to end up is in the prefrontal cortex, in the front of the brain. This is where we do our critical thinking. And when we're born with 100 billion neurons. So we've got all these neurons, and it's the same amount of brain cells that we have when we're an adult, but they're just not like connected yet. They're not talking to each other. So there has to be a lot of migration and pruning of these brain cells. The brain strengthens the path that it needs like to forge forward, and it kind of like sloughs off the rest. So pruning and growing. And we're trying to create those connections and forge through the different areas of the brain to get to brain development, or to get to whole brain thinking. So that's a little preface of what's coming when I teach you guys the hierarchy of brain development. What we also know is that there are some things that affect the way the brain moves through development, and we know that stress, physical, chemical, and emotional stress can affect the way that the brain opens up like a flower. And we have the research to back this up, that physical, chemical, and emotional stress actually impact the architecture of the developing brain. So have you guys heard of the ACE study from like the 90s? So it was a really, really big study, a very important study in psychology, and ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and what it found was that kids who experienced abuse, hardship, and neglect in early life later on had trouble with relationships and learning as they were growing into their early 20s. So it was a really important study, a really great study, but it was also a very limiting study because it only looked at abuse, hardship, and neglect. But Bruce Lipton, who is like the father of epigenetics, he's a cellular biologist, and he's the guy who basically discovered that it's not all about genetics. Like your life does not have to be what your parents' life was. This is what we believed when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s. But epigenetics tells us that a gene can actually be turned on and off based on environmental factors, and that we do have control. So Bruce Lipton found that it's not just abuse, hardship, and neglect. It's any physical, chemical, or emotional stress. Everybody has a stress bucket, and we're pouring in the stress, and at some point it reaches the top of the bucket and it overflows, and then it's like a fuse blowing. The fuse blowing is the neurostructural shift, and that's one of them. And then the gut health is the other, which we're going to get into. I'm a little bit behind on this slide. This is just about the ACEs. So just going back, socialization or neurostructural shift is like literally a blown fuse. It changes the input, it changes the way the brain receives information to develop like a flower, and it affects input and processing and output. As far as the gut, changes in the lining of the gut changes the diversity of the bacteria in the gut, which changes the chemicals in the gut, which changes the communication with the brain. So the gut-brain connection is very important. I don't really have to tell you that. I've got research up here, but we all know if you put sugar in here, brain goes haywire. Alcohol in here, brain goes haywire. There is a very strong connection there. So that is why we need to clean this up first before we can go on to work on any type of therapeutic activities. So everybody's talking about the brain and behavior. It's all the hottest stuff right now: vagus nerve, regulation, and how does behavior actually come from what's going on in the brain? We're going to get into that. these are just research articles, and I actually printed them all out here for you guys if you want to peruse them afterwards. This one is talking about the science saying that stress can literally impair the prefrontal cortex. This next one is telling us that dysfunctional cervical joints, when they're adjusted in the upper neck, it alters sensory motor integration. And these are not like chiropractic studies. This is all from PubMed. We just talked about the gut-brain connection. And then here's one. This is just a Yahoo article. And I bring this up to just see, like, you can see how it's normalized. Pandemic babies are, let's see, it's had nearly twice the risk of developmental delays in communication and social development. That's crazy. And in 2020, this is 2022. This little chart right here, there's numbers from 1990 and there's numbers from 2022. These are the milestones that they expect babies to sit upright, crawl, pull to stand, walk, run. Most of them are extended now, at least 6 months, which is like crazy. And it's all based on averages, right? So something is going on with our kids. And the stat is even old. It's now 1 in 31 for autism. ADHD, 129 million children worldwide, 9.8% of children. Depression, almost 12%. Anxiety, 9%. ODD, 2 to 11%. Sensory processing disorder, 5 to 16%. Developmental delay, 1 in 10 children. Learning disability, 1 in 50. And dyslexia, 780 million people worldwide. And yeah, I can read you the stats, or you can just think of like every time you go to a restaurant, or every time you go to Target, or anytime your kid comes home from school and they're like, this person in my class did this. Like, we are seeing it full blown. This is nuts. Autism is up 384% since the year 2000, since I graduated from high school. In 1995, it was 1 in 1,000, and now it's 1 in 31. So what is going on? Why, like, what? I want to put the question out to you guys. What's different about today than when our grandparents grew up? Can you guys like throw some ideas out?
Processed food.
Yeah, processed food.
Less data.
Yeah. Screens, yep.
Internet.
Totally. So many things, right? And I'm gonna get into that a little bit more. So we'll come back to that. So the brain develops like a flower, yes. And so we have different parts of our nervous system. Like basically in our autonomic nervous system, the automatic part that regulates like heart rate, digestion, respiration, blood pressure, that's the autonomic nervous system. It's made up of the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response to stress, and the parasympathetic, which is rest and recovery. Now, it's normal to go back and forth. It's actually really healthy. The more you can easily move between each state back and forth, the higher your resilience is to stress. And unfortunately, if we have too much stress and our resilience can't handle that, we get pushed over to this fight or flight side, and we're just like living in constant fight or flight, and that is a problem. Imagine this. You guys are like having a great day on a Sunday with your family, and you're walking through the woods, and the sun is out, everything, like, you don't have to work, everything's good, and all of a sudden, a bear jumps out at you. Like, what do you feel? Yeah.
Shock?
Yeah, shock.
Shock at
Your-
first?
your heart rate goes up, your physiology changes, your posture changes, going into protection mode. Like this neurometabolic response to emotional stress creates that change in breathing. We get less activity in our prefrontal cortex and more activity in the brain stem because that's our reptilian brain where we're reactive. Make sure I remember everything. Yeah, and so we go into fight or flight or fear paralysis. So, how ready do you think the guy with the red beard is? Like, what if we just asked him right now to do some long division? He wouldn't be able to do that very well. How about this guy? Would it be a good time for his body to fight off a bacteria or a virus? No. Good time to make long-term decisions with your spouse. Is this a situation where your system is ready for growth and recovery? No. So these poor little kids are, they're going through a lot of stress in their life because there's just more stuff going on right now than ever before. So what do you guys think of, or what do you guys think when the science tells us that increased stress can create these adaptations in the body, which can alter the way the brain learns and the way brain moves through development, which can result in changes in the way we learn, connect, and behave? It's a problem, right? So, and it's not just like, oh, I'm in the vicinity of stress. Like I went into a room and there was some stress going on. It's actually like the changes, the alterations that come from the changes that are being made in the body. So, you know, it comes in all forms: virus, bacteria, mold exposure. It could be alterations in the gut, causing food intolerance, massive inflammation, and pushing us over that chemical and metabolic stress point. It could be social pressure. It could be sensory challenges. It could be too much change or too much schedule. It could be too many things. It could be epigenetics. So maybe one person, like if anyone has like 2 kids and you look at these siblings, they don't have the same level of resilience. One can take a lot and then the other one, like it doesn't take much to set them off. So it's not one size fits all, but it's you know, Tylenol is like the big thing in the news, right? And so at this point in the talk, we usually talk about vaccines. And I'm not here to say pro or con on vaccines, but what I do want to bring to light is vaccines are a stressor by design. They're designed to stress the immune system. The nervous system controls the immune system, so vaccines are a neuroimmunological stressor on purpose. And, you know, it's really the impact of how one person can tolerate that stressor and how resilient they are and where they are and what their timing is when they got the vaccine, as well as how well did they detox after getting the vaccine. Those are all part of it. So yeah, education, demand, entering school is a stressor, changes in routine, all of that, everything is a stressor. So they all impact us in different ways. So this is when I take it to the whiteboard. Remember the curly cue that I drew on the brain? This is basically me plotting it in a linear way, but it is not linear. So I know all of you guys have held a baby before. And did the baby come out and say like, hey mom, can I get some food? Can you change my diaper? No, babies can't do that. So we want to talk about like, hey, when we're building a brain, and let me take a step back and say, building a brain is like building a house. We need a strong foundation, and in brain development, one step goes into the next, and skipping steps can be a problem. So let's just say, like, if we're just thinking about, we're thinking about building a house, and we get these little building blocks. So we're like, okay, here's a block, here's the next block, that's strong, and then like a stress comes in, and now we've got like a puka in this block, but it's like still pretty okay. Like we can still use it in our material, and we're there, and now we're building on top. We have some gaps. So when I talk about gaps, this is kind of like what I mean. We've got some areas that the brain like didn't really build up skill in those areas as we went along. So at every stage of life, we're using different tools to process, connect with, and engage with our world. And we always use the most sophisticated tool that we have. Like if I need to cut down a tree, like I want to use a chainsaw. But what if I only have an axe? Like, what if I only have a gouge, like what I carve my wood carvings out of? Like I only have a gouge and I need to cut down a tree. Like this is where a lot of kids are in the classroom. They are presented with a task and they don't have the tools to meet that demand. So let me erase that because it's not pretty. I don't like that there. This is not my brain. Okay, so let me get back on track here. All right, we go to here. So a 6-year-old is not as sophisticated as a 10-year-old, and a 10-year-old is not as sophisticated as me. So what tool do you think that newborns use to find food or to survive in this world? Anybody?
Crying.
Crying is a way they communicate, yes.
Being cute.
You're cute. So it's reflexes. Reflexes. We're born with almost like an inborn wiring that starts to develop in utero. The first thing to develop in utero is the brain and spinal cord, the neural tube. And so some reflexes help us get out of the birth canal. Just going down that path and having different areas stimulated by going down the canal is a really important step of development. But right now, we're having so many C-sections where it's just a little bit, the medicalization of birth and of pregnancy and then birth. I was just thinking about how I was I went to have my baby, and first I had to wait until I was contracting because they don't have room for me. So I couldn't just labor comfortably in one place, they make everybody wait until, contractions are whatever spacing in between. And then we have to drive down the highway to Queens, where I had to pee the whole time because I'm 40 weeks pregnant. And then I have to enter the hospital through the emergency room and wait for a wheelchair. This is not the beautiful picture of birth that I always had in mind. Birth at home with a midwife, but unfortunately things don't always work out the way that we want to. So going back to exiting the birth canal, that's why with C-section babies, they don't get to have those reflexes turned on at that time, but that's okay. We can do some different types of things to help them kickstart those reflexes. And so what's the big one? You guys know, this one, startle reflex in babies, you make a loud noise. That's part of it's a survival skill. That is what keeps them alive. Another one, to find food. If you stroke a baby like this, what do? That's how they find food. It's the rooting reflex. Now, if I do this to one of you, an adult or even an older kid, and you go like this, I'm really going to be concerned because that is a pathological reflex. That tells me that you've lost cortical function and you've dropped down to living in your brainstem, and now, so it's a sign of a massive brain injury, and you should go to the hospital. But so there's also this. If I go like this, and if someone goes like this, grimaces a little bit, that's a retained primitive reflex. And retained primitive. So reflexes are supposed to serve their purpose in the first year of life. Primitive reflexes, and then get put away. They integrate into our nervous system. They don't disappear, but they integrate into our system so that we can move forward into postural reflexes. So from 0 to 1, we have infantile movement reflexes, aka primitive reflexes. Okay, make sure I covered. Yeah, so why do we care if a baby can hold their head up, roll, sit up, latch, crawl, tummy time? Why is all of that important? Because they're all facilitated, those milestones are facilitated through primitive reflexes being around when we need them and then going away. And when we meet the milestones, we know that everything is working correctly. We can measure that. So what do you guys think the next sharpest tool is as we move into about 1 year old? It doesn't mean that we don't have sight or sound, but what do you guys think the next, like what is a 1 year old doing?
Speech.
Maybe not at 1 yet.
Crawling.
Moving around and touching things. So the next sharpest tool, once we put away those primitive reflexes, we don't need them anymore. Unfortunately, they can come back in times of stress. The startle reflex is actually a retained startle reflex. 9 times out of 10 is going to show up positive on kids who are explosive or have emotional dysregulation problems. So, and that's a really easy test for me to do. I can do it in 1 minute with a kid. And it tells us a lot. It tells us about why they might be having those behaviors. So, movement touch, we're using our big muscles first and then our little muscles. We're getting those skills, touching everything and putting things in our mouth because there's a lot of tactile information, sensory information in the mouth. So a big red flag is when a mom brings her kid into me and was like, oh, they were such a good baby. They never, like, they didn't move and they didn't put things in their mouth. And we have to be like, well, why? Like, why didn't they do that? Like, that's normal, typical development. And so if they didn't do that, we need to go back there and figure that out. But if we have like a 10-year-old putting things in their mouth, then we need to go back and like fill the gaps because we know something is, something's been skipped. So the next sharpest tool, and it doesn't mean we don't have movement touch, but between about like around 2 years old, what's the next thing? And Nicole, you said it, so go ahead and say it again. Speech, yeah. Auditory verbalization, so we'll call it AV. So you're making noises at me, and I'm starting to like realize that these noises have meaning, and I'm making noises back at you. It doesn't start as sophisticated language. It doesn't start as expressive. I'm doing expressive language right now, and you guys are all engaging in receptive language. You're taking in the information that I'm giving you, and you're processing it in your brains. Yeah, it's definitely more sophisticated than putting things in your mouth. So the very last step, and it happens about anywhere between 5 and 7, and the reason why it says 5 and 7 and then to 25 is because the brain is not fully developed until our mid-20s. That's why the teenagers do stupid things. But between 5 and 7, the most sophisticated tool that a human being can have is visual cognitive skills, visual cognition, the ability to see an image in their mind's eye and to look into the future and remember the past. And it's the seat of executive function, organization, spatial awareness, social awareness, critical thinking. It's all happening up here. And so that's, you can kind of like think back to the brain on the other side. We are trying to push through all of this in brain development and arrive at visual cognition where we're using our whole brain to process the world. We're using all the skills, but we have this one. So I'm going to prove it to you that it is the most important and top tool that we have. I'm going to tell you guys something right now. It's going to be 2 words. And I want you to try not to imagine, like don't see the picture of the 2 words that I say. Okay? Ready? Okay. Pink elephant. Okay. Is anyone seeing it in their head?
Immediately.
Immediately, okay. Was anyone able to like stave it off for a second by doing something else? What did you do, Tracy?
Thought about nothing. I don't know.
Okay, you thought about something else. Yeah. How about you, Tran? Did you
Thought of another color immediately.
You did? Okay. Yeah. So you guys did a very sophisticated, like other thing. You still imagine something else, but you, in the visual copy, like you imagine something else. Some people will say, like in this, we'll use skills more down here. They'll drop down into this, and they'll be like, I was just, did I skip? Oh no, okay, yeah. I was just like humming really hard to myself in my brain to try to be louder than the picture that I thought. And some people will be like, I just like started scribbling really, really hard into a paper because, and that would be function like dropping down to process in the movement touch realm. So let me give you guys another one. Does anyone here have a bike at their house? You do? Okay. What color is it? Green and black. And how do you know that? Yeah, you just pictured it, right? You didn't. Is it? Where is it? Is it in your cardboard? Okay. So you didn't have to be like, do I own a bike? Let me make a list of all the things. Let me do this auditory verbal thing and say, well, in my cardboard, I also have a pair of rollerblades and a golf bag and a pair of sneakers. And like, oh yeah, I have a bike. That's one way to do it, but it's not as efficient as using those visual cognitive skills to come to that conclusion. So let's go back and you just have a sip of water. Let's go back to talking about Dr. Amy and her brother Josh. Let's just pretend that like Amy's a 5-year-old, and Josh is 7. And I'll come to that example in a second. Let me go back to Josh. Josh is 7. He's having massive gut issues. And his behavior is moving around and touching a lot of things and talking a lot and making a lot of noises. So what do you think his behavior looks like in class? He's in 1st grade.
Probably really active.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, he's moving around, he's touching a lot of things, and he's making noises, which is really, really disruptive, and it's getting him labeled as a bad kid. So, basically, they're like he's entered 1st grade, and the teacher's like, okay, you need to sit down, stop moving, be quiet, which is taking away the skills that he has, and you need to take these abstract symbols right here and turn them into pictures in your brain, which is reading, and then you need to make some more pictures in your brain and turn those pictures into abstract symbols, which is writing. What do you think Josh is going to do? Stress out and avoid. So there will always be avoidance when demand does not meet developmental readiness. I should wear glasses. So yeah, Josh's behavior, hyperactive, disruptive, throwing pencils at kids, sucking on his shirt, picking at scabs, inappropriate touching. These are all things that are very common in kids who are kind of like living in a movement touch realm, hyperactivity. Now, there's another presentation. Most kids either fall, when they are avoiding like that, they usually fall into one of 2 categories. So that was one side. The other side would be like the teacher calls the mom and she's like, hey, Josh is so sweet and he's just like trying so hard. He's a good boy, he's trying so hard. But you know, there's a lot of tears and he's always under his desk and he's going to the nurse's office. And the mom's like, what? You think my kid is sweet? She's like, when he gets home, he explodes. And you know, this is the holes in the wall situation. And so, sorry guys. And it's also accompanied by like not being a good reader, by the way. So we have this presentation of these two populations, and they're not bad kids. They're just using the tools that they have to get by in this world. So let's pretend that Amy and Josh walk into this room that they've never been before. Who touches more things?
The fidgety one.
Yeah, so he is a toucher, but it was a trick question. Because while he's running around touching lots of things, Amy touched way more things because she touched them with her eyes. Like, you guys know what this feels like? Yes. Did you have to lick it to find out? Yeah, like the eyes touch everything and we can process visually, and we can take in way more information like that with our eyes. So Josh, just because Josh isn't there with the demand, he's not there yet. He can still get there.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when those children are reverting back to the, when they're not like obeying the teacher or whatever, that's part of like the primitive brain that they're reverting back to, like
They're definitely dropping down. Like, kids they can have some visual cognitive skills, but if their skills here, if their tool set here is not very good, then they drop down, and it's like they don't even hear the teacher.
so the crying and like the anger.
The crying and the anger is
throwing
usually
things.
down here.
And
just
that's
total meltdown.
That's like the first skills that they developed, so they're just going back.
Yeah, they're dropping back into
I see.
like primitive reflexes.
Okay.
Yeah, and dropping into brain stem, the back of the brain, back bottom of the brain.
Okay.
And we all do, right? Like, I mean, if we are struck by like seriously bad news or something really makes us angry, we all have the ability to move up and down on the hierarchy. And we're going to talk about examples next, about like what's the situation, like how does it play in here. So yeah, another reaction to stress for kids just living in their brainstem is just like complete shutdown, right? We see that a lot. And it doesn't even look like they're paying attention. What about if a kid has sensory challenges and doesn't like the knobbies on their sock, or they're living here? These are sensory challenges, and we get like jeans never, like sensory kids cannot wear jeans. It's like just too rough on their skin. But maybe like Amy's brother, he always had to wear the same pair of sweatpants every single day. Not just like they bought him the same brand and it looked exactly the same, but it didn't feel the same to him. And then tags on clothes. Like I am walking around with a tag inside my shirt. Every time I wear it, I'm like, I should cut that off, but I'm not. It doesn't bother me enough because I'm attending up here, and so it doesn't. While it does bother me, it's not the primary seat of my attention. People living in like auditory verbalization here, they really struggle in loud, unpredictable environments. These are the kids who are like having like verbal tics and humming and making noises, and the more that they're, the more they're exposed to that stress of maybe entering a new place or just being in a restaurant, things like that, the more they have to control their environment by making their own noises and just getting louder and louder. And yeah, we talked about aggressive, reactive, big behaviors, primitive reflexes down here, socialization. So what if I'm probably off camera now, but what if I did this talk and I'm talking right here? How does that make you feel? Awkward, yes. You're awkward. So what am I doing? I am reading your visual cues. I'm sensing the tension in your body. You might even tell me, hey, like, could you take a step back? But socialization is a visual dance. And it requires really sophisticated nonverbal communication. So what if you're a kid and you're just not picking up on that? You're gonna have like tough peer-to-peer relationships. And that brings me into like friends. If you ask a mom, like, hey, does your kid have friends? They're like, oh yeah, they have tons of friends. And you're like, okay, are they the same age? And they're like, well, no, like, they're a little older, and like, he's really good with babies. Like, babies just love him. And the thing is, babies you can control, and old people, they're like, oh, his peculiar behavior is kind of quirky and kind of cute, and they tolerate it. But peer-to-peer, it's not tolerated. And so socialization, we would kind of classify that up here in a visual cognition issue, because you can't plan ahead to see what your next move is going to be when you're engaging with someone.
Would that be like the next step after visual cognition, or is that in the same like realm of like 5 to 7?
So 5 to 7 is just normally when we start to have the tools of visual cognition.
Okay.
And then that is the highest level of processing that you can have.
Okay.
And then what about trouble with change? Kids who have trouble with change, like we talked about OCD earlier. Those kids are also not there yet in visual cognition. We've got a little bit of bump there. They're not efficiently processing, and they don't have the imagery to predict the future. So they're holding it all together. It's a big world. It's hard to handle. So in order to reduce complexity of their world, they have to wash their hands all the time and line up their toys and hyper-schedule their day and stick to that schedule. And if you go to Foodland instead of Safeway when they're expecting to go to Foodland, you blow up their brain, and we get a bit of, there's a meltdown, which is like a little bit of combination of this and this. So teenagers who, especially girls with no control and prediction, they like get to a point where like they won't leave their room. And then they start not showering and not brushing your teeth, and you're like, hey, like, wouldn't you feel better if you just like, cleaned up a little bit? And they're like not even aware, and they're seeking connection from their friends and they're not getting it, and then they're seeking connection from their family and they're not getting it, and then they're going to seek dopamine, which is like sugar, drugs, and sex. So it's, again, it can be a very slippery slope. Another one that I just like added because I thought it was really interesting, I think so many people are struggling with like across the board, is dyslexia. Like, dyslexia is a visual learning challenge. It's the inability to visualize and see words in the brain. Like, if I say donkey right now, I can picture it and I could like read it backwards in my brain. And kids with dyslexia can't even see the word, let alone read it backwards. And so, so we say why. It could be academics too early. It could be the timing of when it was introduced, or forced academics, when the kids aren't there yet, but they're being pushed and drilling. So that's creating inefficiencies here. And they're dropping down into sounding it out, which is not an efficient way to learn to read, actually. Sight words is key because we see the words in our brain. And so we need to drive through whatever's blocking us to get to here. We need to come back and make sure the skills, the foundation, that we fill those gaps, we fix those pukas, so that we can get from here to whole brain learning. And we also need, again, coming in here, a good gut and a clear nervous system in order to get that drive through up to whole brain. Traditional support for dyslexia could be like interesting fonts, like making the beginning of the word bold and the end of the word bold, or syntonics, the plastic over the sheet of paper. Or kids go to tutoring and they get drilled until they hate it, because if you're not there yet, repeating it over and over doesn't really make sense, does it? It's like, yeah, it's a frustrating thing for me. But ironically, this is so interesting, a lot of the kids with dyslexia in the Brain Blossom program are actually really top-notch athletes. And, but they are top-notch athletes with lots of unintegrated primitive reflexes. So they're so good. They're so good at movement touch. They could like run all day. But then you tell them to sit down in a chair in the classroom and do their homework, and they lose it. So yeah, we need to drive development so that we get through these stages back to thinking of cognition. And then also like adults, like or adults or children, but traumatic brain injury is actually like just, hey, we had an injury, we injured our prefrontal cortex, and now we are living down here. Like our friend's mom had a stroke, and now she's acting more like a baby. But those tools that she's using, that's because she's down here. Of course they're gonna, like, it makes sense that they have total meltdowns and tantrums because they're living in their brainstem now. So there are no bad kids. Behaviors are a window into the brain, a window into the tools that a child is using to process their world. And so we shouldn't go and just try to squash the behavior. We need to take a step back and understand what's going on. I'm going to move back to the screen here. So just like some focused statistics, that's been Dovey in Alaska. But after going, so I forgot to tell you guys, like Dr. Amy started the Brain Blossom program in her brick and mortar in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And it grew to be so successful with helping kids with challenges that the wait list was 4 years long. And that is when she was encouraged to start teaching this to other doctors. And then she made the at-home app so that parents could do this work with their kids in a much less stressful way than getting out to therapy multiple times a week. So 96% improvement on ability, and this is reported from parents, ability to concentrate on a task, 81% improvement in anxiety, 88% reported improvement in ability to regulate emotions, 87% improvement in vocabulary and expression, 79% improvement in mood and self-esteem, 80% improvement with academic performance and grades, and 75% improvement with sensory sensitivity. So that's great stuff. We're really proud of those statistics, and we're just trying to help these kids live the greatest expression of life that they can. And I'm really happy to say that, with Vendovi as a kid, the first thing I did was start adjusting him once I figured out, like, hey, I better really take this seriously. And then we got his nutritional test done, where we did like a blood spot test to see if he had any food sensitivities, not just food allergies, but sensitivities, which are sort of like low lying and don't really show much symptoms besides usually rough skin or eczema. And he had a lot of food sensitivities. So when he entered first grade, I was like, I have to get really serious about this, because first grade is no joke, and he's got to learn to read. And so we went very much, it's not perfect because it's just so hard, but gluten-free, egg-free, dairy-free, what else? All of those things. I mean, it's so hard. So yeah, he's doing great. So these are just some guys in the Brain Blossom program. This little girl, her name is Kaya, and she has Angelman syndrome. It's a rare genetic disease where they're like, she's never gonna walk and she's never gonna talk. but her mom is a chiropractor, and so she brought her into the brain lesson program, and we were like, okay, your brain is developing. It's just, it's going a little bit slower. And now she can walk and talk, and her constant seizures are no more. Yeah. This woman had 14 concussions. She's also a chiropractor's wife, and she used to run the office, the front desk, and she lost, with her traumatic brain injuries, she lost complete organization, function, socialization, and so she came back through this program, and she's kicking butt. This next kid had autism, and he doesn't have it anymore. And so we're not saying that we treat autism or that we can fix autism, but we can help the brain find a better trajectory, right? This kid here was completely nonverbal, and he was also, Shriners had given up on him. Actually, all of these people in this photo are people that traditional medicine had just given up on and been like, there's really nothing we can do for you, so you can just go on and like live the best life that you can with the tools that you have. And he can now walk with crutches, and he's doing great. So the only way we can know if we can help is to do an exam. And what we're looking for in the exam is to ask and answer the two big questions. Number one, is there anything interfering with the way the brain is receiving, processing, and sending information? And number two, what tools is an individual using to process their world? And once we know what the tools are, and we clean up gut health and nervous system health, we can go back and rehab that, fill those gaps, and then the behaviors just tend to melt away. So that concludes my talk, and my big hope is that you guys learn something new to help you understand the people around you. But also, this is a different way to approach it, for sure. I'm the only one doing work like this, and I just ask that if you guys thought it was cool, that you tell your friends, and we just kind of like spread the word over time, because kids need this help, and I'm here for you guys. So thank you. Yay. And they can have a motor output to be able to do those claps. Then we're like, okay. And some people can, and some people can't. So we have all these little brain tasks that we have them do in the exam. Visual cognition, I tell them a story for like 3 minutes, and I'm like, I'm gonna ask you to repeat that back to me when we're done. And then we see like how is their processing, how is their imagery? Because if you have good imagery, then you can see the story in your head and you can tell it back. But then some kids just like word grab. They're like, camping, cat, and then they're like, that's it, that's all I got. And another point I wanted to make about like stresses, and we say screens, but it's like, what do we mean by screens? Like, screens have so many detrimental effects, of course, but when we were, well, not when we were kids, we always had TV in our lifetime. But let's just think back like 100 years before TV, where entertainment came from reading. Like, reading is much more difficult to get a story. Like, even if they're listening, right? They're listening to the radio, or they're being read to as little kids. That's developing their visual cognition, because they're having to listen to the story and see it in their brains. And the reason why TV, after a long day, is so relaxing, you don't have to use any visual skills, because the visual is presented to you. So I thought that was another really interesting point.
I think that would be good to go over in the talk, because I had not even considered that, like how important reading is because of that fact.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
Really
And even like every week so most of the kids are in second grade here, but so we're all getting our spelling homework, and I get excited for alphabetization, because me and Adobe have this system. I can't even like visualize the alphabet in a row to alphabetize, and I don't think most of us can, because we actually should not have been learning it in a sing-song way. We should not have learned our ABCs in a sing-song way. That's like the worst way to learn. I mean, it's like jumping down to auditory verbalization. But what if I asked you, like, what is 3 letters before M?
Sing it.
Yeah, sing it. Okay, well, what's 3 numbers before 13? 10. Yeah. And J is the 10th letter, and M is the 13th. So how does our brain get that math in such a sequential way that we know, but we can't, like, nobody can figure out the alphabet?
But I thought that the alphabet is just, it doesn't matter how the alphabet is presented because you're only supposed to know the letter. Like, numbers are actually sequential, letters are not.
Yeah, but I'm like, well, why do they even make kids do alphabetization? Like it does help with organization, like getting organized sequentially. But when I'm doing the homework, because he doesn't have it memorized, we have to first write it all out, and then we circle the beginning letter of every single word that is on the alphabet, and if there's multiple of the same letter, we have a system for that. And then he sees his word, and let's say it's truck, and then he goes t, and he goes down the list, and he goes, this is him using a lot of auditory verbalization, t, and he's also using movement touch because he is moving and he is touching, t, and then he gets it and he puts it over here, and then it's like r, and he goes down the whole alphabet because he has no idea where R is.
Tense does that too.
Yeah. So.
And then we number them.
So it's just really interesting to think, like, well, what if they could visualize that in the alphabet and know where it was? Like, it would all be so much faster because I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can alphabetize this, and I mean, I'm not perfect. I still need to sing too, but I know that L is before Y, and I could do this pretty fast. So I have more efficient tools than Windows in that way. And I just think, yeah, it's interesting. I get really excited about alphabetizing. How can we make this better? I actually one time even went into Canva, and I made 3 sets of each 3 letters that are next to each other, like ABC, and I made like a picture of letters that starts with that they all have something to do with each other. Like, I can't even remember what it is right now. I don't even know if I can find it, but I was like, here's A, B, and C, and here's C, D, and E, and these are a different set of pictures. And I was like, if he memorized, like, if he got familiar with the pictures, he would be able to know that, like, these 3 letters are the relationship that they have with each other. But again, that was just a fun little thing where I was like, well, maybe this would be a better way to learn.
Is he more visual though, or is he more like do or hear? Because there's 3 types of learning, right? And I was curious where that fits in, where it's kinesthetic, visual, and verbal, or auditory.
Kinesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, auditory, and hearing or speaking.
Vision.
And visual. Like, so those 3 ways to learn are actually, like, the people who are kinesthetic learners just aren't using as efficient tools.
But is that, like, for your brain, is that just some people learn better using those tools because their brain is just suited to that, or
No,
is it
it's
just
because,
that the
like,
building
they just
blocks?
haven't.
Okay.
They've got those gaps that need to be filled.
Okay.
You know, so
Interesting.
yeah, it is
Do you
interesting.
think, like if a kid has been on antibiotics, like, a lot, like, so then that screws up their gut, and then all the signals there?
Oh yeah. I mean, like I said, antibiotics is a stress, and our stress bucket is our stress bucket, and yeah, people can only take so much. I'm like, I think about this whole Tylenol thing, which is, I'm just like so tired of hearing about it, but I'm like, well, Tylenol is another stress, and that's as far as I need to think about it. It's just like, okay, way to go, guys. You figured out one little thing. Like, why don't you just figure out this stress causes all these problems?